This meeting is being recorded. Hello, everyone. Goedemorgen. Welcome to the post-mortem of the Kubernetes Contributor Summit EU 2023, I think. I don't know, what year is it? Time has no meaning. We are here to talk about all the things that happened, what went well, what didn't go well, what we can do better, and what still needs to be done as follow-up work, because just because the summit is over does not mean our jobs are done. Ha 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 ha. You all signed up for more than you thought. Okay. We don't really have a formal agenda for this one because this is more of a group thing.
We do have a retro doc, but it's not linked from the calendar.
It's
just from the notes.
I got it.
Let me throw it in chat right now for anyone that doesn't have it.
Where did it go?
Oh, Laura beat me.
Oh, there it is.
I don't have to paste it. Thank you, Laura. Somebody want to officially take notes in the doc? Anybody? Okay, Ray's taking notes. So let's see. Where do we want to start? Things that went well. Always start with an upbeat thing. Let's see. Josh says signage was good. I agree. Brienne had these arrows that were great for pointing people in right directions.
Yeah.
Now,
I ended up waiting up in the sort of upper coffee area, though, just to direct people around the corner.
Okay.
It was just, it was a long ways to go, and people got sidetracked.
Yeah, there's not really much you can do about that based on the space that you have. It was very difficult from the plans to see what that was actually going to be like, because it looked like we were going to walk in the door and just be there, not knowing that there was actually like walls in the way and you couldn't go through.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's specific to each site. There's no way we can codify that.
Well, the one thing I would say is, and we can put this at the bottom, is that tentatively out of the operations volunteers, we should have a couple of people, one or two people who are assigned to directions. And if they're not needed, we'll reassign them. But I can think of, we just won't know ahead of time what the layout is really like in person.
Yeah.
Until the day before the event.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we have people on site, we had one person who was in Amsterdam not in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, like 3 hours away, who we were trying to get to go do a walkthrough of the site, but we weren't able to make that happen. If we have local people, we should probably make sure that we have somebody doing a walkthrough of the site at some point before we get there, so we can have our video walkthrough or something. Yeah, just
that will also, depend on whether the LF can get that taken care of as well, because that has to be coordinated when they do their walkthroughs, and if the venue is okay with a outside member also walking through.
Or the LF folks just carrying a camera.
They've done the camera thing in the past. I don't think Brienne was able to do it this time around.
I remember we had a couple, like in San Diego. I remember Paris did a walkthrough, I think. And it was, now I have a good visual spatial idea of what's happening.
But that said, moving on to the second item, which was having us have sort of our own complex that was this one wing of the convention center, was awesome, because one of the problems we've had with some past contributor summits is the inability to control the space, which resulted in having a lot of sort of random tourists wandering through the space. And we did not have that this time. And it was nice, particularly when you combine that with the enormous amount of lounge space there was in this venue. It really gave people what I think they want most out of a contributor summit, which was the ability to sit down and chat with other contributors.
Yeah, it related to that. The number of times that we shouted, "Okay, sessions are starting," and people would just kind of look and be like, "Okay, we're going back to talking because we're having a coffee and we're sitting at a table."
Yeah.
I think focusing on that as, I don't want to call it a track, but yeah, focusing on that space as a track.
I think for any future contributor summit, we have to assume that at any time after the opening session, 50% of the attendees are going to be sitting or standing around, in the hallway or in the common space talking, because that's, with however many we've done of these, I don't know, 8, 10 contributor summits, that is clearly what people want out of a contributor summit. And I'm into just embracing that.
Yeah.
So do we want to just like have unscheduled time, like the morning is just, or, we do the opening thing is like, hey, we're going to start talks like after lunch, but for now, go network with your friends.
Mingle. Yeah.
I don't know about making it unscheduled, but just having a dedicated, here's the loitering space.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And maybe a longer lunch or something.
Yeah.
Right.
And what I'm saying is, when we're thinking about the number of concurrent sessions we're going to have in any time slot, we should think in terms of only 50% of the attendees being in those sessions and the other 50% not being in, right? And so if you look at those numbers and you say, hey, 50% is 80 people and we've scheduled 5 concurrent sessions, we might want to cut that down to 4, if you follow me.
Yeah.
Because this was something we observed. San Diego was particularly chronic. In San Diego, I actually measured that 70% of people were out in the hallway.
Oh.
And it was a problem because we'd scheduled 6 concurrent sessions, and some of those sessions had no audience.
I think that's something that we need to address in terms of, I hate to turn away talks when we get people in, but for this one, we basically accepted every talk. Except for like a couple that were just not appropriate.
Yeah. Did we have any that failed to get an audience? I didn't see any.
I mean, my unconference only had 3 people in it because we announced it and said it's happening right now.
Okay, well that's fine.
But that's an announcement issue.
Yeah.
And my concern, right, is that a lot of people are not used to sort of like how to be like welcoming when they're like talking in groups. So I think I will make it a point to make sure that we talk about like the pizza, like Pac-Man method, or like try to make sure that, if we're going to do this intentionally, that we actually have some structure in place so it doesn't end up leaving people feel like, oh, well, I don't know anybody here, so this isn't for me,
We did try and facilitate something like that at Detroit with during lunch, like you remember with the tables.
I was
it just didn't quite. It didn't quite pan out the way we thought it would.
Well, actually, one of the things I'm thinking about is actually a less planned version of that. Like, what if we had something like a little standing, clipboard or whiteboard on the tables, so that if a group of people get together who happen to be, say, the release engineering team, they can just write release engineering team on the thing and drop it in the center of the table. In case anybody, who's a release engineering shadow wanders by, they can join. But it doesn't require any pre-planning, if you follow me.
I mean, that could be an index card. Yeah.
Well, it would need to be big enough that you could see it if you were walking by the table, right?
Yeah.
And I guess for me, if it's going to be like a sort of team meeting sort of thing, that there should be like some like perhaps preparation or notification so that there isn't any wondering from the folks that are there. But I think for, people who are coming who don't necessarily have a strong affiliation with like a particular group, or they're just trying to meet people and feel like belonging in the community, not necessarily like, oh, that's release engineering. I don't know anything about release engineering, so I'm gonna go do something else.
Currently talking about, fill it in.
Right. Like there should also be somebody there for like, hey, I'm the person talking to new people. Right.
Yeah.
Or newer people.
We need to brainstorm ideas. We need to assume that hallway track is going to be a major part of the contributor summit, and we need to brainstorm ideas to make that not become cliquish. I mean, because really what people are doing is these are people they've worked with online for the last year and have not seen, and they want to catch up with them, right?
Yes.
And we don't want to disrupt that. We just want to make it inclusive.
Right? Yeah. So I guess we can take that as an action item for the planning of Chicago, that we are intentional about how we set up the hallway track.
Yeah.
Sure.
One of the other things I was going to say, and I didn't actually put this in, I should add this to the notes, is I felt like this contributor summit was really good from a perspective of getting useful work done, if you follow me. That is, I felt like one of the things that hamstrung us in Detroit was that for so many of the sort of meeting discussion-ish sessions, we just didn't have enough of the right people in the room to actually make decisions. And it was different in this one, right? The website working session, the LTS session, right? We came out of there with a decision to resurrect the WGLTS. And other things that bring me back to how the contributor summits were 4 years ago, when they really were sort of dominated by working sessions and long interminable arguments about things that we couldn't fix.
What changed? What was different?
There's finally people that want to do the LTS thing. Like I remember seeing the notes. I went back that night and read the notes, and it is a sea change from the discussion I helped Mike run for in Seattle. Right.
I get that. I'm more asking about what was different about this summit, that there were multiple useful things that came out of it. I know the website.
I think part of it is we're now sort of coming out of the post-COVID era, because right after COVID and people getting around and together for the first time again, it's much more, there was much more of a social focus, just like it's been forever since I've seen you and, want to catch up. And now we're getting to the phase of where we can do, work again, if that makes sense.
The other thing is, I think it was just turnout. As in, I remember having discussions in Detroit where we were like, okay, these are some good ideas, but we can't really do anything about them because X person isn't here. Whereas that just didn't seem to happen as much in Amsterdam. And
that's interesting to hear, because it felt like a lot of folks were saying, well, so-and-so's not going to be here and so-and-so's not going to be here. We can't have...
I can tell you that there is a good chunk of people that actually paid them for themselves to go because they wanted to have these discussions.
Yeah. And for me, right, buying that explanation, right, and thinking about repeatability and how to replicate it, right, what needs to happen, right? It was in Europe, so people, if they were paying, had to be motivated, had to come out of pocket, a fair amount to make it work. Whereas now we're going to be in Chicago, does that diminish perhaps that factor, or what do we need to do to make sure that the next time is still fruitful in this the way this was?
I think part of it is there have been a lot of these sort of larger topic things sort of circulating in the background, and we can't necessarily dictate that for the project itself,
of course.
So before the LTS discussion, there's been a large discussion going on about expanding SKU. And, maybe we don't do LTS. Instead, we just, we expand our SKU support so people can, skip releases for upgrades. And there have been some of these bigger discussions sort of going on amongst the SIGs in the background. And I think, that's part of what fed into this being a, more successful event, was just that there are these background issues and people are actively working on it and want to get together and meet and talk about them.
The other thing actually that I felt like happened here, but I would like to verify with some audience survey. So I'm putting this in as a good thing. So one of the things I was worried about was the amount of conflict between the contributor summit and the colos and the project meetings, which were all on Tuesday. And I feel like what actually happened is a majority of people chose the contributor summit, if you follow me, that we actually had less people unable to attend session because of their obligations outside than we've had in the past. Now, mind you, I might be wrong about that because obviously I saw the people who chose the contributor summit. But it does feel, contrary to my personal expectations, like the Tuesday conflicts were not actually as bad as they've been as the Monday conflicts were in the past.
There were a lot less colos.
Yeah.
And also most of the vendors decided to have their vendor specific events not on Tuesday.
Yeah.
To avoid conflict with all the colos. Whereas before, with it being 2 days, you kind of had to pick like, okay, which day do we conflict with?
Yeah. And I guess with the project meetings were often only an hour in length. So people could go to one and then come back. Would have been nice if they'd been closer, but it's
going to be different for every venue.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that's the problem with so many of these problems is the fact that every venue is a new venue.
Yeah. And it was interesting. Like I wasn't there for most of the day, right? But like I did pop by the Argo Con and it was rammed with people. Like they're like so it was and seeing that both were like well attended and seemingly targeting their prospective audiences, that was interesting.
Yeah. And I actually wonder if a few of our attendees had planned to spend half the day at, say, ArgoCon and couldn't get in and thus returned to the contributor summit.
That's fair, because some of them did like sell out,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I know some were running between the contributor summit and the HPC batch day.
Yeah. Anyway, I would still like to do a contributor survey and see what the conflict picture looks like. But right now, I'm not inclined to suggest asking for a time slot move. I don't see evidence that it would be a net benefit.
We wouldn't get it anyway.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, did we send out the post-event survey?
I don't think anyone actually made a post-event survey.
It's not there yet.
It was, yeah.
Let's put that on the agenda for this week.
Yeah.
Do we have the one from last time that we can reuse? Okay, cool. Yeah.
Because hey, that's a great question to add to the survey. Right. So did you have conflicts? How did you handle it?
Right. So I'd like to have that on our post-event survey. And then I'd like to do a second, 2-question survey that we send out to the contributors because I want to identify the people who didn't go to the KCS at all because of conflicts.
Ooh, cool. Yeah.
A note about surveys in general, it would be good to actually have that survey in the opening remarks link, like in the slides. Just a note for the future, because generally people don't check their email. So if you want to get a really good response, either have it in opening or if you have closing remarks, which we didn't have, something where it's easily posted day of where people can grab it. QR codes.
That could be a link.
Yeah. We did the QR codes for the unconference. There's no reason we can't do it for how'd you feel about this event survey?
Yeah, yep. I feel like having QR codes, not necessarily as like an entrance ticket to the contributor celebration, but at least around perhaps. And I don't know if there's some incentive that we can add.
Raffle a prize.
Yeah. That we can add.
I can commit to throwing in a Kubernetes beer stein for that.
There you go. Yeah. But anything like that, if you want to get a lot of responses, just day of, while it's front of mind, is better than an email because a lot of people miss them.
Yeah, actually, here I've got it, which is you raffle off a prize and you give the prize at the SIG meet and greet.
There you go. Ooh. Get people to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
I was going to say one of the things I said lower, but I'll mention it now, is the idea of maybe having specific badges just for Contributor Summit where people go and they pick them up because it's a little easier to tell. You could put the QR code on the back of it or on the inside that just says, fill this out, show up at SIG meet and greet, hand in your little ticket, something like that.
I can
like
tell
a
you
little laminated card, like a
well, like just something, just
separate badging is a whole other can of worms, but we want to address.
Yeah, I left some notes down in the what we could do next time. I'll explain that later. So,
and actually talking about QR codes leads into the next thing on the list, and that is that having shortcuts was generally useful. Having the short links, having the QR codes around, being able to paste them. Like Brienne printing out the QR codes as stickers and slapping them on signage was really, really helpful. And also throwing them up in the intro slides saying, look, we know you're not going to type in the link. Here it is. Pull out your phone right now. We're leaving this up for 10 seconds while we talk.
One suggestion, when we do put that up with the notes, tell people to remember that you have to be a member of KDev and log in with that email to access the notes, because I was getting dozens of access requests from people trying to do stuff. It's just like, we're not going to open it up to the internet for people to edit it.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That's
well, it's just as an FYI when mentioning it.
Sorry, I got it's very dusty in the desert right now. Okay. What else went well? Going back. Oh, being able to say, hey, the celebration, see that fence over there? That's it. Like, you have an hour to walk these 50 meters. Like, that was really, really useful. And like in Detroit, it was a bit of a hike. And I don't remember what we did in LA.
It's all venue specific. That's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's what's in the area.
The one that I would say is the counterexample was, I forget which venue it was, Barcelona maybe? Somewhere where we had a very nice venue. Like it was a really nice place. But it was like a 30-minute train ride away from the venue. And as a result, turnout was like 10 people total. And so that clearly showed us the limits of things, right? Because San Diego, it was about 3/4 of a kilometer away, still packed full.
Yeah.
Right?
Do we know the Chicago venue, like the convention center or whatever?
It's McCormick Place.
Okay.
So when we're picking venues, we can be a little bit more, I don't know, deliberate, I guess, in saying, yeah, these all look good, but this one is 2 miles closer. So
that's usually something that we've always weighed in when doing our venue selection. It's usually like we've tried to stay within a 10-minute walk. And if it's going to be farther than that, it has to be like, really worth it.
Or maybe we even look at a Kate's bus.
We did do that before for Barcelona. And that did work okay. I will say though, for Chicago, no, it's awful. Don't ever consider driving in Chicago.
Yeah, I've driven in Chicago. I'm familiar.
We did it for Valencia as well. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it was Valencia, not Barcelona. Sorry.
Which part of Chicago? Oh God, it's inside the loop. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've been in that part of Chicago. That's okay.
So
what's next?
So things that didn't work so well, which we have a whole variety of. I'll kick it off because I put the first one in there, which is there was some kind of a problem with the badging. We haven't heard back from CNCF events what happened, but somehow a minority, like I don't know, 1 out of 20 of the people who registered did not get Contributor Summit badges. And we dealt with it at the time, but it was obviously a bad experience for some of them. And it would be nice to know what happened so it doesn't happen in Chicago.
Do you happen to know their names? Maybe a couple names, so we can backtrack and verify what's happened.
We can back scroll through Summit staff because some of them got mentioned there.
Okay.
I did notice that at least 2 of them were in the very last batch of people we approved. I don't know about the others, though.
And that leads to another issue of the timing. Having the CFP run very close and having the reg run up until just a few days before the event really put a lot of stress on finishing things off. I get that some people have like last minute, oh, surprise, I'm going. But I'm betting they're not, oh, I'm going tomorrow.
Well, I mean, I would say actually for this particular KubeCon, they're literally, I know there were people at my company because I handled the list of who's going from my company, who were not definitely approved until a week before the event.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
And I have a feeling that the same will be true with Chicago for a minority of American attendees, where they're effectively going to be contingent approval based on how the company does this quarter or whether or not one of their coworkers cancels. So I think we need to come up with a way to encourage people to register earlier, because I don't think we can realistically close registration until, the last day that events tells us they can accept people.
If we do separate badging for the Contributor Summit, then that does change the requirements, because we can say, hey, go in and do the registration for the Contrib Summit, whether or not you're going to be at the conference.
I can say right now, there will not be separate badging.
We can't even get something that can attach to the badges that you get.
Potentially, if we ourselves are staffing and doing that.
Yeah, I mean, like what I was thinking of is like one of those little like card machines, Bob, that like you put in like the hard plastic and then it just like kind of shoots out a thing that we can like, hey, clip this onto your regular thing.
So conferencebadges.com. I've now been telling people about this everywhere ever since we used it for PyTexas. It just requires a printer. You can print them day of, which is kind of nice, but like you can get them in all kinds of different kits. But the nice thing about having a badge that you can kind of clip onto your current badge almost is that like it's easy. Actually, it's really easy for people to see that you're supposed to be there, which I know with a lot of volunteers in various spaces, we were having some issues with that whole scenario. And also gives us a chance to add like specific stuff to Contributor Summit, specific notes, specific everything.
If we are doing it ourselves and staffing it ourselves, that will be less of an issue. The biggest thing is at this point, the LF in general will not do separate badging for like through their system.
Right.
One other issue with this time, with registration on this time, we did not close registration at all, I think. There are a lot of people who were registered on Saturday and even Sunday. It was supposed to be closed on Thursday or Friday before the event. And some people would, well, we need to test if it's actually closed or not, I guess. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we had several problems with registrations.
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, so there are at least 3 or 4 people, I think, were registered at last minute. So that was the reason. Which is okay. We just need to test it or confirm that, yes, it's closed down. Because it creates, I guess it's, well, I feel bad for those folks because they kind of registered, made an effort, and then we tell them, hey, sorry, no. I don't know. Doesn't feel nice.
Bob, next one.
So one thing that the Reg team was not added to the community group. There was Puya was added. No, Noah, I don't know if you were added or not. But we've been directing all the Reg requests to community. And so we were getting a bunch of emails with people asking questions and like, hey, I have these food restrictions. Is that a thing? And like the only people that saw those were essentially me and Josh.
Yeah, which a couple of times led to pretty longish delays if both of us were unavailable.
And we did create Summit-team @ and I think we need to make a point of changing all the communique for Chicago from community @ to Summit-team @ and also we can mail out as that, which makes life a little bit easier. So
yeah, I would basically big +1 to just do a Summit team for everything Summit related.
Yep.
And then you just add all the staff to that one as part of an onboarding task, and
should send us that. Everything should go in and out of that. 100%.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
All the leads, and I suppose it would be all the leads and all the comms shadows as well.
Yep.
Comms and Reg.
And Reg, yeah. That list is going to get real big real fast. Well,
and that's fine. That's what it's for.
Maybe not so big because that's a separate problem we have to address.
Yep.
But yes. Sorry.
The next thing was the Reg sheet wasn't frequently being updated with the org member list. So a lot of people were being flagged as not org members, but were actually org members, and having to basically go do a manual check.
Now, was this primarily on folks who became org members in the recent X weeks?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe we should just add something to the reg field that says, have you become an org member in the last 3 months? That way we can just flag it.
We can sort it out too by just making sure to update that column in the spreadsheet whenever reg is processed. It's literally a one-line script that you run.
Okay. I was just going to say, do we have a defined workflow for that?
It's literally in the reg guide.
Okay.
Like the command that you run. Yeah.
Well, then, whoever takes reg for Chicago will need to know that. And it's in the guide. And updating the guides is also further down on the list. Red sheet might need to have another column to make tracking easier. Well, I guess that would be part of the...
Yeah, it will be one of the reasons is because it's not clear who approved or denied. And I think it will be good to have that feedback, I don't know, tracking who actually approved or who denied, because I'm not sure. I wasn't sure. There were a lot of people are trying to update registrations, and some of those people, I don't know, at least for registrations, there were at least 3 or 4 shadows. And I'm not sure they were all very deliberate and all very careful with approval or denial. And I'd like to have a tracking.
That I think is a big +1 to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can also that way see like which of the shadows are doing work.
Yes, who is slacking.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. And helps address one of the things farther down. Need to be clear on who's allowed and when the last approvals are allowed for social guests.
Yeah. We were getting like emails to like, a couple hours before the social asking for, guest approvals for the social. I think we honestly just set the same date that when reg closes. You have to email us before reg closes if you're bringing a guest and give us their name. You should know the like Friday before if you're bringing a guest or not.
Yeah.
I'm iffy on that for the guests, just because, sometimes it's like, oh, you're going to be in town, blah, blah, blah.
It's only supposed to be your partner.
I suppose that's true. That's true.
Or like child or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So like,
then I guess that makes sense. We can call it the week before, and any outliers are going to email us anyway.
I mean, and technically we're supposed to ask events to approve numbers of guests because they have a guarantee with whatever the venue is. So like, they don't care who the guests are, but they care how many there are.
Yeah. That checks out. Okay. So yeah. Same day as Reg closes. I'm going to +1 that. That's a good idea. Moving on. Any other comments on Reg stuff before we move on? Okay. Content and scheduling. Yeah, we started behind. And standing there while Christoph looked at me and said, "How much time do we have left?" I'm like, "You're over by 10." So
ooh.
Yeah, I do feel like, and I put this comment in later on, I feel like the operational room monitors were not told that part of their job was to cut speakers off when they were overtime.
Huh.
Because like, I literally actually talked to one of the room monitors and I said, "He's overtime, you need to cut him off." And the room monitor said, I don't do that.
Like, yeah, you do. That is part of your job.
Yeah. Ugh, that's not good.
So that was a miss in the room instructions, but the because it that cascaded because we had another issue that I don't know how we could have anticipated. And this is actually an open question of how can we anticipate this sort of issue. Was we didn't know that there was a law in the Netherlands that coffee has to be served by people. And therefore a 20-minute coffee break was nowhere near long enough.
Oh Lord. Wait.
Didn't you notice that they had staff serving the coffee the whole time? And as a result, like 15 minutes into the break, people hadn't even received their coffee yet.
So is that why, like, even in the sponsors session, they didn't do that with tea? I feel very left out.
Yeah. I don't know why it is, but it's actually true, because like literally I had somebody tell me, no, you can't get that for yourself. It's the law.
It's like pumping gas.
Yeah, apparently.
So
that's wild.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, it falls into a more general class of what are things that could force us to make the breaks longer, right? Because one of the other things that has happened in previous KCSs is if the break space is like down a long hallway from where most of the sessions are, these sorts of things. I kind of think in general, in terms of being realistic about the hallway track, that we should probably plan to have 30-minute breaks and not try for 15-minute breaks, because I don't think 15-minute breaks are ever going to end up being only 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell them it's 25.
Yeah.
I mean, even an hour lunch, everybody took an hour and a half, and then all the sessions that happened right after lunch got slightly screwed.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how we could anticipate weird laws like that without having somebody local.
Sure, but like Chicago, what are the odds, right?
Chicago, I will say, in the McCormick place specifically, is very, very, very union. So
yes.
I don't think it'll be an issue for coffee. But like the type of thing where you're not allowed to plug in a microphone yourself.
Right. But I was going to say the Linux Foundation should know this. They should know all of that information. So like that should be something we just need to ask every time, or that needs to be part of like a pre-planning session of going to the CNCF saying, what weird things don't we know about? Like, for example, I don't know if anybody else knows, but apparently the entire KubeCon EU was nut free. by requirement, and they didn't tell anybody.
Wait, what?
Wait, what?
No,
What do you
I'm
mean?
actually serious. Like
I don't understand the statement.
our events person had some extra peanuts that they had gotten for themselves, and so they had them sitting on our booth. We had a CNCF staff, like a Linux Foundation staff person, come bolting up to the booth because apparently they had told the RAI that it had to be completely nut-free throughout all of the conference. And so even us just happening to have like the 2 bags saying, hey, we had extra, come grab one. Like if I had known that, I would have spent so much less mental time looking at all the ingredients on everything so that I knew I'd be safe eating anything.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently they didn't tell that to anybody, including the sponsors.
But we always have to assume that there's going to be things that we don't hear about in a timely fashion, because even if we specifically go over this with the event staff, that sort of information, like the nut-free thing, might be something that only one member of their event staff knows, and has not actually circulated among the total Linux Foundation event staff, right? So the people who are arranging the catering on the Linux Foundation side were made aware of that, along with a whole long list of other things. And as a result, they just didn't pass it on as significant. So there's always going to be stuff like that. I mean, I think the real takeaway from this is just make the breaks 30 minutes. And that way we also have some squeeze time if a session's running late.
I think that kind of plays into the next point that you had brought up, where you talked about, Josh mentioned the forum sessions needed longer time slots. Is that inherent to the venue? Is that inherent to things that we knew or didn't know?
Yeah, so these were the ones in the main big room, right?
Yeah.
That were scheduled as 30-minute ones that were largely presentations. The problem is that most of them were not actually presentations. They were a short presentation meant to start a discussion, but because they were in a 25-minute time slot, there wasn't enough time for a discussion. So I think what I'm saying is that was an experiment that I don't think worked out the way we wanted it to.
Okay, I thought you were talking about how it related to the room being a forum, which I think might have feed in there, but
no, I just think we didn't have enough time for discussion, right? Because what ended up happening was that people had a presentation that was 15 or 20 minutes, and then we had like 5 minutes to discuss it, and had to go into the next one.
Well, I'd put that back on in the reg section, actually, almost, or no, because CFPs are going to fall under here. People request their time slots, and if they say, I want a 25-minute slot or I want a 55-minute slot, which is an option for them to select, if they say a 25-minute slot and they actually needed more, there's not much we can do if they underestimated how much time they're going to need.
So one quick thing, we have 12 minutes left, at least for the scheduled time.
Jesus.
I don't have anything after this and can continue, but I don't know about other folks.
Show of hands, who can keep going? Okay, we got a couple folks who are going to drop off at least.
I watched the recording. I don't have a lot to add,
Do we want to just pick up with a part 2 next week and keep going on this? Laura's like, oh God, let me finish.
Absolutely.
So, if you don't mind my driving for a short time, I think we can actually zip through most of what went wrong.
Do it, Josh.
Because a lot of these are just things we needed to mention to keep track of them, so we try to avoid them next time. Like the unconference scheduling is actually not one of those. So let me go through the other ones that are just quick ones. End of CFP was too late for good scheduling, which we mentioned before. The other one is the schedule. We didn't get up any kind of a schedule until shortly before, like not even one that said the contributor summit starts at X time and ends at X time, even if we didn't have anything in between. It's something I think we need to actually do next time, is to actually have the schedule arrive in various stages, first general timing, then specific blank schedule, and then the full schedule. We need to remember to request power for the workshop room, because didn't have any. The shadow thing, actually, I think we need to revisit. That's going to require discussion. The coffee we already mentioned. People got sick. We just have to anticipate that's going to be the case, and that actually should be what the shadows are for. But as we mentioned previously, is we should create, per Laura, we should create the survey in advance of the event. One of the other things that came down to, this should have gone under things to do next time. And we didn't mention this bad thing. So the SIG meet and greet was poorly attended by new contributors, like very poorly, despite being in a location that was convenient to lunch, and actually sort of generally central and being on the schedule. I think part of that was in the rule handbook, I put a whole schedule of announcements that were supposed to be made at the SIG meet and greet, and not all of those happened because of the hand back and forth between Kim and Laura. It was down under the stairs, as Laura points out, but they did put big signs out. But the other big thing that we came away from it, that Laura and Kim and I were discussing, is we need to rename it. People don't know what the heck a SIG meet and greet is. And I think we need to rename it to make it more generally appealing to potential new contributors.
Yeah, if you go down underneath the things we should do next time, the suggestion was Kubernetes new contributor brown bag as a possible option, or something like that, indicating like bring your lunch, come sit, come discuss with people who are doing things.
Okay, so a couple discussion items here. So first of all, on conference scheduling. So we had the issue with the unconference slots, Noah?
Yeah, because we basically, lunch was till 1 o'clock, and Jason and I were still sitting down putting things in slots at like 12:58, saying, okay, what's in the first slots? Announce them right now so that we can get all the later slots filled in. And we really need to focus on doing that a little bit earlier. It's easy for an hour to get away from you while you're on site, but that hour makes a huge difference in being able to schedule these things and getting them attended and making sure people know when particular topics are going to be discussed.
Yeah. We didn't have a big unconference board the way we've had at some contributor summits.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
Doing it all in GitHub, while it was good for being able to do upvotes, I don't think it was as prominent in people's, it wasn't as in your face. And having someone be able to coordinate the two, if we're going to do GitHub, then still also having a physical board and saying, nope, these are ahead in the race, or whatever method we want to use. Having them, out of sight, avoid the out of sight, out of mind issue by having the unconference board right in front of everyone, I think is a big takeaway.
Okay, and then the other thing was shadows, the discussion item. And I agree with whoever put this in here, which was, I feel like we had a bunch of people volunteer as shadows, and they were not actually assigned useful work that they could do.
There was definitely way too many. I think that was sort of an experiment to say, how many people want to help out? And then half of them just didn't.
Right.
I would also just flat out set you must be an org member or sponsored by a lead, because so many of them just completely, utterly flaked out.
Yeah. But again, we had a couple people that were not org members that were very helpful.
And they should have a route to be able to participate. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, there's some of the stuff when I think we'll want to make some exceptions. Like, for example, I'm thinking for Chicago, drafting a member of our event staff. And that's somebody who's not an org member and will never be an org member, but they would be super useful to have at the event.
Yeah.
And that would be a specific individual exception rather than a policy. So I'm, other people heard me this in the release team. I'm very much a fan of people should have like one shadow, or if they have a task that is highly distributable, like, maybe two, and that we should also differentiate between shadows and staff, if you follow me.
Mm-hmm.
That is, like, look at it this way. Say I'm in charge of operations, right, on site, right? I have a shadow, and that's somebody who's there to learn the job and take over if I get sick the day before the contributor summit, right? At the same time, I have like 5 staffers who are going to be like room monitors and stuff. But those are not shadows. They're different from shadows.
That one I think is very specific to ops versus all the rest of the roles. Like for something like comms, I think having 2 shadows, but both of them are in line to potentially take over, makes a lot more sense than having 1 shadow and half a dozen people.
But again, no, but it's the same as true with registration, is that registration, you have both staffers and a head of registration shadow. A lot of the roles break down to a difference between shadows and volunteers. And I think it would also change people's attitude towards their expectation of doing work. And how much work, because we can get people as volunteers, like say, I'm going to be a room proctor, who are like, but if you get sick, I'm not taking over operations. That's too much for me.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I think that's going to be different for each individual role.
Yeah. Well, because we'll have specific numbers, right? Again, operations is a nice one, right? Is the maximum number of people you need for operations is like the number of rooms you have plus 1. Yeah. And Reg decides how many people they need, right? Which is probably generally going to be in the 2 to 3 range, unless we're doing our own badging, in which case it would go up.
I was saying in chat about comms, I'll say it aloud as well. Comms also could use volunteers versus shadows, because they're those who we want to train to be able to take over the role of deciding which comms go out, and there are those who would like to volunteer to help write those comms and just contribute that way. So there's a difference there too.
We got 2 minutes, by the way, for anybody that is going to need to drop.
Yeah.
What do we got left?
Well, the rest of it is going to be things we should do next time. So the question is, which things have we not already talked about?
Yeah. Some of the stuff we've definitely talked about, like the content and scheduling.
That's big.
Yeah.
Pre-populating the docs. Yeah, we forgot to do that. We talked about on conference. We talked about we really need the CFP to close earlier.
The CFP also, the notification just to go out earlier too.
Yeah.
There's a couple weeks behind.
And I mean, when the CFP closed and then we didn't get the notifications out for took us like a week to get the notifications out. I mean, shit happens, but okay. The shadows is a big one. Rename the meet and greet. At least one person from CNCF staff at meet and greet.
That one. So Brienne was supposed to be there. But unfortunately she got sick.
Oh, is that what happened? Okay, that explains it.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, good.
We were
good
wondering
materials
what
delivery.
happened. Yeah, the materials all showed up, and then we were trying to kind of move things around. We might need to kind of revisit how much the meet and greet coordinator does, like, because I think part of it really needs to be the day of. You need to be like at the door saying hi, directing people where they need to go, kind of thing. That might need to be like expressly written down. So
it is. It's in the role.
Oh, it is. I thought so. Okay.
It's actually because of my turning this over to Kim. I'd say meet and greet coordinators is probably the only role that we have that has complete role docs. Because I wanted to not be responsible for it anymore.
Yeah. I thought that was what the role doc said, but I wanted to just bring it up because that didn't quite happen.
Yeah.
Ish.
And yeah. And that was the case. That was another example, actually, of the shadow dynamic not quite working correctly, because one of the things that we should be doing with our shadows, if you're a lead for a section, is that the person who is your specific shadow, you should be working with them every time you do something. And therefore, if they have to take over unexpectedly, they know exactly where you left off.
That's a problem that presented itself in a lot of Slack communications, where I'm 100% certain that people were reaching out to Bob, even though Bob wasn't officially running it. And I'm willing to bet people were reaching out to you, Josh. And I got dragged into things. And I'm like, well, that's great, but Puya and Nigel are not on this team. And there are 3 people that are leads right now, including the shadow. I don't know an easy way to fix that.
For what it's worth, most of it I did tell them, like, just post it in the channel.
Yes.
At least that's what I was trying to encourage people to do, unless it was like a very specific request that, like,
let me go back and just drop a brief note, because it's just, things I forgot for the retro. By the way, so I felt like the activities that we did at the social were very suited for the venue. So let me actually put that in there.
While Josh is writing that, it might be good just to make a Slack team, like a Slack handle that's for like contributor summit leads. And then that way it's really easy for people just to remember to ping that handle. And then that can just change over person to person to person every year. That's probably a lot easier than trying to remind people, oh, hey, you're reaching out to the old lead, go to this lead, etc.
However, in the DM space, that wouldn't necessarily work, because I put together a DM for all of the leads and tried to bring everyone together and ended up hitting the limit of the number of people that you can have in a DM, and some people got left out of that DM.
So you can make a channel just for that.
I think this is just specifically for tagging people, like, hey, if you're having a problem, either email this address or tag the Slack handle in the Contributor Summit channel.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for the leads to like communicate, but like just for like, hey, instead of DMing a person, go do this instead.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that.
Yeah, I'm a big +1 for that one.
Oh, somebody writing that down somewhere. I've lost where we are in the notes.
Yeah. No, I was adding a couple of other things that I thought of. Like we actually didn't have any organized new contributor activities at the Contributor Summit this time.
Yeah, after we determined
to do that in Chicago.
Well, after we determined that new contributors were just not.
No, I mean new org members, people who like literally became an org member in the last 6 months. We had nothing for them.
I see what you're saying. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So
let's put that under other.
Yeah.
That's also kind of dependent on the content that people explicitly submit.
Well, we can design specific activities or an activity.
The flake one would probably be pretty good. Yeah. From what Antonio ran, and we've run the deflaking one in the past as a general one in the past too.
Yeah, but I also want a social activity for new org members.
Yeah.
Because again, we were talking about before, the problem with the hallway track and potential clickishness is that one of the big portions with new org members, we don't want them to go to the Contributor Summit and not talk to anybody.
If we can try and put them together into a sort of cohort, say, look, you're all together in this as everyone who joined the org since the last summit.
Right, or something.
Didn't we do like
it's one of those brainstorm ideas?
Bingo thing or whatever, like, we
did not do bingo.
Questions.
We did not do bingo, and I'm not sure that that's what we should go back to.
Okay.
Because at least in Detroit, I'll point out in Detroit, only like 8 people did the bingo, and I know we had no more new org members than that.
Okay.
So, and so I think we should brainstorm something else. But at this point, we've lost the person who's leading Chicago. So
that's Well, he'll be watching this later.
Yeah.
Hi, Nigel.
Yeah.
Related to that, I think it would be a good idea to make it a formal piece of running the summit, that part of your duty as lead and potentially as shadow, based on what you were saying earlier, Josh, that reviewing the rule books after every summit for an update to keep them more updated, as opposed to saying, when was this last updated? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's supposed to be, yeah, the lead, every section lead, right, should be reviewing their own rule book, should have it open. To that extent, I think one small thing that we should do in the meantime is actually break up the documents. Because currently, aside from meet and greet coordinator, all of the roles are in one long ass document, which means that updating
they
it
were
leads
separate.
to conflicts. No.
Because I know I wrote a separate reg one.
Awards is separate for NA.
Okay.
Yeah, I see separate, at least registration, content, marketing.
Wait, do we have stuff in two different directories?
I'm looking at the events team repo in the Eventster.
I just threw it in. If you pop over to content, there's awards, content, meet and greet, session manager, SIG face-to-face, social content, and unconference all have their own.
Okay.
And some of these should probably be put, like, there's an unconference.
Okay, right. Yeah, okay.
It seems weird that that's separate.
Which one?
That there's an unconference lead separate from content coordinator. And
well, no, in the past we've had separate people for that. It's better if we have the volunteers, it's better to do it that way. Because running an unconference is its own thing. And we really would like to, if we have the people, it's nice to have one person coordinating the pre-programmed sessions and other content, while a second person focuses only on the unconference.
I guess that would alleviate some of the problems that we ran into on site.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the only reason why we don't do that is we don't have enough people to do it.
They end up with like 8 leads.
Yeah. That's fine. If we have 8 volunteers, then please let's do that. And I will point out that there's a Kubernetes tradition for people to volunteer to be a shadow thing and be handed a lead position. That's how I got to be release lead.
We don't know anyone like that on this call, Laura.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we need to straighten some of that out. But the big thing is to actually review and update these. Because a lot of these, are either going to be incomplete or out of date.
I think I'd like to try and do it as a sprint if we can get everybody back together, similar to a doc sprint. Everybody open your run books. We're doing this right now. I mean, not right now, but I mean, metaphorically right now.
Yeah, and operations really needs to be a team one, because operations is the catch-all of here are all the things that need to happen that are not specifically content.
And I've done operations for the past, however many, and I never wrote a run book, which is on me.
Yeah, where is operations? Here.
It's not in there. There's no run book.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Yeah, so we need to generate that, because all the stuff we were discussing today about room proctors versus somebody at the door versus other things, that all goes in operations, and it's going to be one of the longest run books once it's finished.
Yeah, the run book is up here, is where the run book is.
Well, you know what to do about that.
There's
so kick it off, and I'll add my stuff, and other people add theirs.
I also realized that the reg query actually isn't in the reg readme. There's a part of it in a commented out to do in the markdown though.
Wow.
Excellent. That's on brand.
Yep.
What else do we have that we need to talk about before we wrap this up? We need to go through and redo the run books. We need to formalize some sort of shadow process.
Yeah, one thing on run books, those two go together, which is like on the release team, one of the items in the run book should have a section that is what shadows are doing. And since we've explained there's a difference between shadows and volunteers, right? Here's the section on what shadowing this is like. And here's the section on the volunteers that happen in the section, generally speaking, right? The volunteers are chosen by the lead. Here's what we need volunteers for, depending on the KCS schedule and venue, et cetera.
Yep. Anything else we need to talk about before we call this and go get back on GitHub and write more Markdown? I mean, the biggest problems were around scheduling and us just not. I do think related to the scheduling, I feel like there was an umbrella issue that Brienne put together, and it sort of existed separate from what we were doing. And we didn't really tie it to our schedule very strongly and making sure that we were lined up with our dates.
I can comment a little bit on that one. It's just like, so we asked for the to push to do stuff all in GitHub a while ago. But honestly, GitHub is not great for spreadsheets unless you're doing an actual project board, but that doesn't tie into everything. And so there's an old template that Brienne was essentially copying and putting into GitHub, but the source of truth is really the big spreadsheet in the doc. I would honestly just get rid of the issue and make the source of truth the docs.
Mm-hmm.
And then we link to the docs from the staff sign up maybe, or they're linked in the Summit staff channel in Slack.
So when we generate the notes document for the next one, at the top, just here's the tracking spreadsheet, here's the timeline, here's the XYZ.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and linking the notes doc in the spreadsheet and making sure, doesn't matter which doc you have open, you have links to all the other docs and the Zoom and et cetera, et cetera.
It's the breadcrumbs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we know what we need to do, which is we're going to go through and I'm going to poke everyone to look at your run books. We'll try and get that. I'm going to start on the run book for ops this week. I'll work with Federico too, who I think did a great job, which I look at back to when I was running ops the first time versus running ops the fourth or fifth time. I think he did a great job.
The Reg playbook honestly can mostly just be deleted because a lot of it is for stuff regarding the new contributors and all that. But
adding back in things like updating the spreadsheet with the org membership. And you said that's already in the Reg runbook, right? That one liner?
I thought it was. And I guess it is not. That's my mistake on that one.
Okay.
It's there's part of it for pulling from dev stats in a commented out to do in the markdown, but if you're just reading the markdown doc, you're never going to see it.
That was the comment you mentioned.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Sure, I remember what we talked about 3 minutes ago. Honestly.
I swear I put that in there, but I guess not.
Can you link that in then?
I'll dump it in there.
Work with Mars and get that in there. Nigel's going to be running the summit in Chicago. I'm going to back him up. Anybody else taking any lead positions that they're going to volunteer for here and now? Did not think so.
Yeah. I was offering Caslin.
Oh yeah, I intend to volunteer either for comms or possibly for ops. If we need that.
Yeah, I can shadow comms just to have a reliable shadow.
Yeah, I offered to help
I think
Nigel.
we can surely find one.
Yeah, I offered to help back Nigel up, and then we'll just see who we don't get volunteers for, because I can do ops, I can do unconference, I can do programmed content, just depending on where we need somebody.
And I'll be emeritus, and Chief said that he'll be able to commit more time to helping too.
Good,
Cool.
good.
Yeah, I'll volunteer somewhere.
Having 2 or 3 emeritus folks hanging around is probably beneficial just in general to making this run smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
I think I cut you off, Ray.
I'll just saying that I'll volunteer someplace wherever there's needed.
As tribute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. So I have a feeling I'm ending up doing SIG meet and greet. So I wouldn't be surprised.
And
I'd be willing to help with SIG meet and greet.
Yeah, like
SIG brown bag. Let's get used to saying the new name.
Yeah,
Right.
SIG brown bag.
Right.
Well, actually, I wouldn't even call it SIG brown bag just because so many people don't know what SIG means. So new contributor brown bag.
There you go. I like that.
And we'll do some chaos changing of everything. Experiments are fun.
I'm here for this.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good job, everybody. I'm exhausted, but everybody that helped out did a fantastic job. I mean, considering the places where we fell short, 90% of them were based on things we never could have foreseen.
Mm-mm.
And the rest of them were just, oh, we're human and we forgot something. So
maybe we need like a special shirt, like I survived organizing.
Yeah.
I mean, the contributor summit is the size of what like the first KubeCon was, right? I mean, this is the full conference organization.
Yeah. Well, and we've had, one of the things I want to recognize is that we're kind of recovering from having sort of broken the chain of sort of management education, if you follow me.
Yeah.
Because San Diego was a mess because of the disastrous venue.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
Very
we went straight from
disastrous
San Diego
venue.
to COVID. And our first 2 contributor summits post-COVID were kind of thrown together at the last minute because we weren't sure if we were having one or not.
Yeah.
So, and prior to COVID, we did not do a great job of documenting rules. So, we're kind of having to rebuild systems. And even for those of us who have been at every contributor summit or almost everybody contributor summit are doing the whole, what did we do in Seattle exactly? I know we did something, but I can't remember what it was. Yeah. So there was a lot of, even with this one, there was a lot of remembering a little late things that we were supposed to have taken care of and we're not in docs anymore.
We learn and we grow.
Yep.
Or try.
Okay. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to all the leads and all the helpers who actually helped and were not on this call. You all did a bang up job. Thanks.